Would you please join me in a responsive reading? I am the self that dwells in the heart of every mortal creature. I am the radiant sun among the light givers. I am the bell from where the sound begins. Welcome to Fountain Street Church, a place where thinking anew is not only encouraged, it is our foundation. We believe that the purpose of liberal religion is to free the mind, grow the soul, and change the world. My name is Stephen. I've been a part of this church since 2005 when I moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan. Now, like many churchgoers, I was brought here because of its minister. Unlike many, it's because I'm related to him. One thing I do love about this community is that both skeptics and believers belong at Fountain Street. Here, doubt and belief are free to work together to free the mind. I know this because in many periods of my life, I have been a skeptic. It was something I always struggled with because of whom I lived with, and something I struggled to find a reason why. And I eventually realized that it was because church and home, for me, were intermingled. It's very difficult to listen to someone in this pulpit when that same person has told you things like, take out the trash, where are you going? And the worst thing to ask any person in high school, who is she? But it was for this reason that I had to find other ways in which to inspire faith. I participated in community service. I was active in Fountain Club, our high school-age youth group, and this led me to realize how I was connected to this church. At Fountain Street, we believe that everyone desires a life that is meaningful, a life that makes a difference, a life that changes the world. More importantly, this was a value I learned early on from my father. That is the value that has allowed me to free my mind and grow my soul. So if you are new to this community, I would ask that you think of other ways to worship beyond this Sunday service, because you may be surprised when you get inspired and who your inspiration was. Thank you.
Just a little harder when brought about by friends. For all you care, this wine could be my blood. For all you care, this bread could be my body. The end. This is my blood you drink, this is my body you eat. If you would remember me when you eat and drink must be mad thinking I'll be remembered. Yes, I must be out of my head. Look at your blank faces. My name will mean nothing 10 minutes after I'm dead. One of you denies me, one of you betrays me. Peter will deny me in just a few hours. 3 times will deny me, and that's not all I see. One of you here dining, one of my 12 chosen will live to betray me.
Cut out the dramatics, you know very well who.
Why don't you go do it?
You want me to do it?
Hurry, they're waiting.
If you knew why I do it,
I don't care why you do it.
think that I admired you, now I despise you.
You liar! You Judas!
You wanted me to do it! What if I just stayed here and ruined your ambitions? Christ, you deserve it!
Hurry, you fool! Hurry and go! Save me your speeches! I don't wanna know! Go!
You sad, pathetic man, see where you brought us to. Our ideals die around us, and all because of you. And now the saddest part of all is someone has to turn you in, like a common criminal, like a wounded animal, like a jaded mandarin. You're like a jaded mandarin, like a jaded, faded, faded, jaded, jaded mandarin. Get out! Get out there waiting for you! Get out! Get out! They're waiting for you! Every time I look at you, I don't understand why you let the things you did get so out of hand. You'd have managed better if you had it planned. Why?
Look at all my trials and tribulations, sinking in a gentle pool of wine. Just me now, I can see the answers to this evening. Is this morning? Life is fine. Always thought that I'd be an apostle. Knew that I would make it if I tried. Then when we return, we can find the gospel's told. They'll still talk about us when we've died.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its seed while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. In restless dreams I walked alone. Narrow streets of cobblestone. 'Neath the halo of a street lamp, I turned my collar to the cold and damp. When my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light that split the night and touched the sound of silence. And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking. People hearing without listening. People writing songs that voices never shared. And no one dared disturb the sound of silence. Fools, I said, you do not know. Silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words that I might teach you. Take my arms that I might reach out to you. But my words, white silent raindrops fell and echoed in the wells of silence. And the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made. And the sign flashed out its warning in the words that it was forming. And the sign said the words of the prophet are written on the subway walls and tenement halls, and whispered in the sound of silence.
In
In the bulletin, which I was using to make the announcements, I overlooked one of the things that pleases me most in my tenure here, our relationship with the community college, who bring their diversity lectures in here 3, 4, and 5 times a year. For those of you who watch the news, you might know the name Matt Taibbi, who is a commentator in a variety of ways, who will be standing in this spot or over there this Wednesday, and you don't have to turn on your TV, you just have to show up. No cost expected except your time and your attention. It is a pleasure to have this wonderful relationship with the community college where we can share the blessing of our sanctuary with the community in ways even larger than ourselves. In the readings for the Common Lectionary today in the Christian community, there's this very well-known passage from the Gospel of John. It's enigmatic and troubling, and everyone knows it, but no one knows what to do with it. Very truly, I tell you, says Jesus to his apostles, or his disciples, unless a grain of wheat falls to the earth and dies, it remains a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. We hear that all the time, and yet we lose the paradox that the living thing must die to give birth to new life. Jesus goes on. Those who love their life lose it, and those who hate their life in this world will keep it eternally. Whoever serves me must follow me. There's another inversion right there. And where I am, there also my servant will be. Who serves me, the Father will honor. Troubling, difficult, demanding words. In the 18th century, the British poet Alexander Pope, who was very prolific, created a long essay, a poetic essay, of which these 10 lines are perhaps the most famous. Know then thyself, presume not God to scan. The proper study of mankind is man. Placed on this isthmus of a middle state, being darkly wise and rudely great, with too much knowledge for the skeptic's side and too much weakness for the stoic's pride. He hangs between, in doubt to act or rest, in doubt to deem himself a god or beast, in doubt his mind or body to prefer, born but to die, and reasoning but to err. Cheerful thoughts to begin a sermon this day, aren't they? But we are dealing with enigmatic issues. I have been doing so all during Lent, and Lent is a contemplative season. I remind you that I am honoring my esteemed predecessor, Duncan Littlefair, who began a series of sermons on the nature of God in the winter and spring of 1945. Unequal to his task, when he preached them, the crowds grew and grew. I'm preaching mine, and the crowds do not grow so much. But I trust that those who brought their minds will find them nonetheless engaging. It is useful to remember that 70 years ago, on this very day, or this week, not only did Duncan Littlefair preach, but Humphrey Bogart married Lauren Bacall, perhaps a more significant act in the long run. That the Arab League was formed at this point, chiefly to oppose the Jewish state that was forming in Palestine. Okinawa was bombed almost to obliteration. In his sermon on this Sunday, 70 years ago, his sermon topic was, Does God Answer Prayer? He made this observation, that prayer is the voluntary, self-conscious effort of the personality to adjust itself to God so that God can work more effectively in and through that individual. Prayer is the turning of the self toward the source of goodness in the world. When Duncan started, he was engaging in what might be called critical theology, lifting up the doctrines of his day and examining them for their wisdom, their accuracy, and their pertinence. I, on the other hand, am engaged in something called constructive theology that has yet to say yea or nay to whether God even could or should exist. And so you see, we're really quite different in many ways, not only separated by 70 years. But believe it or not, we agree more than we do not, including the thought I just read. It is much to my point today, and some might say it's providentially so, but we'll find out later. I should note, for those who have asked, that we are going to be republishing that series of Duncan's sermons. It's being edited right now, and it will be available along with my comments, although I should point out that he wrote sermons that were being collected into a group, and I actually wrote a manuscript that I'm turning back into sermons, so you'll get the manuscript, which is different from the sermons. So if you wonder why they are different, it's because there's a difference between the spoken and the read word. What can I say? Of those who have not been here for the previous comments I've made, I landed last week on something I call the great surmise, that the world we know allows us to think of two things as being true. It may not be proved true, but they could be true, and we don't have to suspend our belief in reality and science or our own experience to believe them. The great surmise is not that God exists, but that there is one truth to all of reality, not two or three, and there is one love that holds it together. It's a lot more complicated than that, but I can't summarize those three today. I will say this much, that by one truth I mean that this reality we live in contains everything we need to understand our existence, that we do not need a supernatural realm to explain the natural. The earth is enough, as Isaac Asimov once put it. Despite a universe, though, that is constantly expanding and creating and evolving, it is still one reality, and everything in it is part of a single fabric of reality, even the parts we don't like. One love is a little harder to explain because we think of love as that kind of palpitating feeling you have towards somebody else, but it's at root something much more basic. I mean that cohering force that connects time and place, whether it be the strong force that holds protons and neutrons together all the way up to the irresistible gravity of black holes. All the stuff that reality is creating would fly into a zillion bits were it not for the powers of gravity to hold it into one reality. And love is really that force with consciousness attached. As I have said from the outset, any valid religion or theology has to conform to the world we live in. It may not ask us to suspend our belief or our knowledge in order to sustain it. I think this surmise does that. One truth, one love. But, as Antoine de Saint-Exupéry once observed, we live not by things, but by the meaning of things, which is what religion is about, the meaning of things. And today I want to ask what the meaning of our existence is in this world of one truth and what love. I differ perhaps from other faith communities in that most of them will start with, here is God, what should we do? I say, here we are, what should we do with where we are? I start with people and ask, what does it mean to be alive? My late colleague Forrest Church put this more eloquently than I when he said, religion is our human response to the dual reality of being alive and having to die. Think about it. That's our response to these two momentous facts, which by themselves do not mean anything, but when we put them together, are meaningful in ways we cannot understand. I am alive and have no reason to be. I did not ask to be made. I am going to die, and I do not wish to relinquish what I was given. What does this mean? The response are all the religions in the world. Church and I are asking what sort of being we are. Now I go back to Alexander Pope, who summarized it all by saying that ours is a middle state. I love these: darkly wise and rudely great. Shakespeare put it even better. He said, we are arrant knaves all crawling between heaven and earth. Don't you love that image of crawling between heaven and earth? As though they come so close, we have to be down on all fours. Biblical tradition says we are made like God in the image thereof, and it would seem that we are somehow different from other creatures, and yet when you look at the genes in our cells, they are the same genes you can find in animals, plants, amoebas, even viruses. Science says the same amino acids that make up all of our DNA exist throughout the universe. They've been found even on places not Earth. Our physical nature clearly is not different from anything else. And yet that leaves this bizarre sense that we are different because of our non-physical nature, the part wrestled over by theologians and philosophers for at least 3,000 years. You can go read those books. I've tried. I'm still confused. I do remember a book by Mortimer Adler, perhaps one of the last great public intellectuals. I read it in a book called 10 Philosophical Mistakes. I liked it because I make a lot of mistakes, so I'd like to know which ones they are. He observed, speaking of human nature, that in the case of other animals, their nature is constituted by quite determinate characteristics. They are instinctive. In the case of the human species, it is constituted by determinable characteristics. In Jewish lore, it is said that human beings were made incomplete, that they are unable, they were not finished by God. And when Adam asked why, God said, because your job is to finish creating yourself. We have determinable characteristics, choices, freedoms that other species seem not to enjoy. Our range of choice is greater than any species of which we know. Of course, other species do have a range of some choices. They're not totally determinate. If nothing else, the fox has to choose which hole to hide in to escape from the hunter. But clearly, our capacity to make decisions seems enormous compared to others. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Well, if you ask some people, it's a bad thing, because if we had just played by the rules God set down in Genesis, we'd all still be naked and playing in a garden. And be happy too, I should point that out. Of course, that's the Christian version of that. Judaism and Islam have the same story of Adam and Eve, but they don't interpret it quite the same way. And of course, Buddhists and Hindus have their sense of why we came to be where we are. And I'm puzzled. Why do we insist on answering this question before we've fully thought it out? Like the idea of God, we want to rush to the answer without standing in the question a little longer. I want us to stand there a little longer. What does it mean that we humans have such a huge range of potential choices? It's a blessing, to be sure, but some days it's a curse, I got to admit. I go to the Meijer, say, and I'm going down an aisle, and there's more cereal in the aisle than I can eat in a lifetime, and I'm supposed to make a choice? How about when you have to pick around laundry detergents, new and improved, stain-removing, white stuff? We have more choices in Meijer than we can make in our entire lives. To give each one equal weight is impossible. And those are the easy choices, our moral choices. What to do, whom to love, to whom shall I be accountable. These are infinite because we are infinitely related. And we know the momentousness of each of those choices. I long ago remember a comic strip, Peanuts, many of you remember it. Charlie Brown, every soul, the sad sack of reality with whom we can all agree, is walking away from school and looks out of the frame toward the reader and says, there is no greater curse than a great potential. You understand what I mean. I had a number of report cards that came back in my youth. I read them as a grown-up, but I remember them as a child, in which the wonderful teacherly hand with the Palmer writing would say, "Weldon is not working up to his potential." No one told me I had any, or exactly what that potential was. I think that's something we all can understand. No wonder so many around us surrender their potential to a higher authority, the state, a boss, even a religion. "I don't know what to decide, tell me." And there are only too many people willing to tell others what to do. Or they retreat to a lower authority. "I'm hungry, I eat. I lust." You can fill in the blank. We don't exercise any judgment in choices, or we hand it all over to someone else, because the power of choice is so immense. It is hard. Let's accept for a moment, without deciding why, that we are creatures on the isthmus, and isthmus being that narrow place of the middle state, that's just how we're made. Human beings are neither fallen from grace nor saints on holiday in the world. We are exactly where the rest of creation is, part of that single garment of destiny. What we want to know is to figure out what to do with that, not to change it. And here's where I'm going to try to make my one point today. When I started out preaching, I was told make 3 points. I'm lucky if I can get one done now. Okay, let's imagine for a moment. What does it all mean? We're going to start at the very basic levels. Like the electron in the atom that escapes and strikes another atom over there, which in turn joggles a few more, and then starts a chain reaction. All of our choices have that much influence. Very small, but very real. Animals make choices. Like I said, the fox has to decide where to hide. Plants actually do make choices, although not consciously. And together, in aggregate, they have created forests, dug canyons, created new species, just by deciding instinctively what to eat or what not to eat, where to live and where to die. Our human choices, because we can think about them, amplify that effect. They're not random, are they? They are chosen. And when we make a choice, what are we doing? Here's where the logic gets important. When we make a choice between hot dogs or spaghetti, we're making a value judgment. I want this, not that. When I choose to marry my wife and not some other person, I am saying my wife is the right person for me. It's a value choice. Now, is it the right choice? I don't know. But we have decided that that choice has more value than that choice. And in so doing, we have added value to that transaction. Do you hear what I just said? The act of choosing adds value to the object chosen. Sometimes it's momentary, Fruit Loops or Corn Puffs. But it could be as conscious as, shall I have children? And each of those imparts a value to that choice. That's when we give meaning to things, as Saint-Exupéry said. We create meanings by choosing them. Are they the right choices? Sometimes. Consider a painting for a moment. Doesn't matter which. Everything in that painting would not exist if human beings had not made choices about them. There's the wood in the frame, which was a tree. There's the canvas that was, in fact, part of a plant. There is the paint that was also another plant. There are the brushes, the hairs of animals. None of these things would have come into relationship to form a painting without a human being saying, I want to make a picture. And so humans, by exerting their choices, create new value and things in the world. Last night I went to the symphony's performance of the Bach B minor Mass over at the St. Andrew Cathedral. I discovered two things that is still thrilling 300 years later, and the pews at St. Andrew's are monstrously hard. Both of them are value transactions. But think about that piece of music. It's an unnatural example of of change because, first of all, Mr. Bach had to think of all the sounds that don't occur in nature. Then he had to write them down in a code that is indecipherable unless you learn it, which 300 years later is still decipherable but only reproducible if one has killed a number of trees, formed them into violins and violas and celli and into bassoons and oboes, have slaughtered a few cats for their gut, ripped a few horses of their tails so you can make them into bows, and trained yourself to sing in ways you would never do in the shower. An unnatural act that produces sublime beauty. Astonishing when you think about it. What I'm trying to say is that all our choices are creative choices that enhance something in our lives and potentially something in the world. Objects acquire a new value. They become a Degas or a Picasso and not just vegetable oil. Relationships become precious. This baby is my son. And now comes the great leap. If our human choices always include evaluating and valuing something, these choices either enhance the connection between truth and love or they diminish them. Every decision we make is a place where we can connect truth with love, where we can sew the garment of destiny into a fabric that holds us all. The act of valuing, making a choice, pursuing it could be mistaken, of course. We are imperfect creatures. In either case, though, we have the choice between bringing love and truth together into a fabric that holds us all, or tearing them apart to leave strands through which we fall and to create a world less whole. From those who have been given much, much more will be expected, says Jesus of Nazareth. We have been given much. The power to think, the power to feel, the capacity to value, to esteem, and to diminish and deny and to harm. Because we can choose love and choose truth, I believe our purpose is to do that. That is why we exist in the universe, to sew the garment of destiny. Genesis tells us that we were made to till and keep the garden. Another great metaphor, and I agree. Our purpose, our existence is to attend to and tend the garden, to spin the thread, to weave the cloth, to sing the song, to play the music, to paint the paintings, to love truth into wholeness. When I perform a christening, I often cite the wonderful Lebanese poet Khalil Gibran, who reminds us that your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. So far as I can see, that is our mission statement, to help love long for itself, to help life long for itself, to create what the philosopher William James called maximum subjective richness to our existence. Religion is about awakening all of us to creating that world with every act we make. We are under orders, friends, to sew together the truth of the world into a loving garment. Now that we know what our true task is, we have to figure out how. Like I said, we're not good at it, certainly not perfect. For all the beauties of the world, the paintings, the poems, the beautiful music, there are still wars. There is poverty hatred, violence, and fear. Injustice is laced through our garment as surely as beauty. Too often we use our choices to divide rather than unite, to deny the truth even when it is there, to refuse love even when it is offered. How sad this is, but yet it is true. So while we have great power, we do not have the great wisdom to use it. Back in 1946, Einstein wisely noted that the unleashed power of the atom has changed everything but our modes of thinking. Returning to Duncan Littlefair's thoughts 17 years ago, that prayer is the voluntary, self-conscious effort to adjust life to God. I see the wisdom here that this is the doorway to any honest idea of God, some ideal that is where we can go. Great as we seem to be, we are not the center of the universe. We're not even the center of the world. We're an imperfect union of mind and heart and truth and love ourselves. But we can imagine a more perfect union, can we not? We can picture it in our head. We can long for a world and a life and a way that is better than this. And the fact that we can is what urges us on every day. Yes, we know very much, but we know there is much we do not know. So we look for knowledge as well as justice. Great as we are, we know that most of what is around us is not human, and so we try to care for the things that don't even know we exist. Ironically, we will never rise to our true potential until we realize how small we are in the universe. If there is a reason to believe in a God, and I think there is, this is it: to be told where we are, to be reminded how small but real we are, and that the task of sewing together the world into truth and love is not ours alone, but it is certainly ours. It was not work we asked to take on, but neither is it work we can decline to do. The God that we need to believe in, yes, need to, is out there. But I can only tell you about him or her next week. Before I conclude, let me add a few words of personal appreciation for my decade of service here, and forgive me if my emotions get the better of me. Some of you may remember Alice Walker's character Shug Avery, who noted in The Color Purple that the only God she ever saw in church was the God people brought in with them. Truer words were never spoken. We arrive here with our hopes on crutches, with our dreams in slings, with our faith on the ropes, and hope to leave better than we arrived, hoping that something I say or something you hear will be a balm to your life. In many ways, church is a hospital for hope, isn't it? And as a physician of the soul, I sometimes know the best treatment might be as painful as the condition itself. Each week, whether you hear it or not, I pray to be given a wise and healing word for someone in this room, mostly myself. That it has happened more than not as a witness, not to my powers, but to your forgiveness, to the God you brought in, not the one that I have in my heart. Together, we have brought our battered souls and hopes here week after week, and we continue to live. In the course of the decade I have been amongst you, 400 people in this church have died, larger than any single church I have served before that, and their faces are etched upon my heart. To live in my life is to live a life of constant grief and gratitude for that grief. This morning I learned of the passing of Teresa Buist, and her face is alive in me today. Also in that time, children have grown. Babies have become teenagers. Teenagers have become parents. Strangers have become friends. Our city has found a new chapter in its life, even as our state is still struggling to find its next chapter. Our country is sadly more divided than I've ever known it, and the world is hotter in every sense of the word. These are not easy times to believe, nor are they easy times to come to church, nor do I have the gifts at my disposal to create magic that hold people enraptured week after week. I simply stumble on, hoping that we can share the journey together. But that's because together all of us have a faith that tomorrow matters even if we don't know why, that life is worth living even if we don't know how. We just keep doing it. This place strives to find an honest faith, a genuine hope, true love, and boundless joy. Like liberty and justice for all, these are not yet true for everyone. And so it turns out we have faith beyond faith, that what lights our hearts alone can together help light the world. Happy anniversary. May there be many more. Amen and amen.